Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and today's episode is going to have some spoilers from the first two episodes of Kenobi, so I'll wait for you to leave, Steve. It's okay. Alright, let's go. First, I'm going to give my hot take. I was blown away with Star Wars nerdiness and nostalgia by the first two episodes of Kenobi, as I knew would happen. I'm a huge fan of Ewan McGregor. I love him as an actor, and it's great to see someone of his caliber and talent come back and take on the reins of Star Wars. It was also really cool seeing Owen Lars be a badass. Even the first scene, which featured Order 66, was extremely surreal. I mean, to see an event that you've studied for so long from a different angle was kind of cool, and also very bittersweet. We joke a lot about Order 66 on this channel, so it's actually kind of difficult seeing, those Jedi Masters die trying to defend those younglings, which is, universally accepted as a very heroic thing to do. It was also really cool seeing the world of Daiyu. You guys know I have a thing for Yoseminopolises. It kind of reminds me of Hong Kong, or maybe even those Star Wars Underworld episodes that Lucas shot 10 years ago that were, ultimately canceled. I also really love seeing the fake Jedi. I mean, that was hilarious. That's exactly what I would do if I was in the Star Wars Underworld. Magnets. But the one thing that really stood out for me and that really confused me about the first two episodes is what happens with the third sister, Reva, who manages to skewer the Grand Inquisitor at the end of the second episode. So just a bit of background on the Grand Inquisitor. He's the leader of all of the Inquisitors, and he was introduced to us in the canon Rebels series, which takes place around 5 BBY, which is important. He was clearly alive during this time, and ultimately he ends up dying after losing a fight with Kanan Jarrus around 4 BBY. This new Kenobi series, where the Grand Inquisitor gets stabbed, happens around 9 BBY, almost 4 years earlier. So what exactly has happened here? Well, we're going to take a stab at this like Reva did and try to figure it out. The first possibility, of course, is the stab is just a flesh wound, a tiny round flesh wound that has perfectly cauterized immediately after the blade is withdrawn. Just in case you guys don't know, if you ever do get skewered by a spear or an arrow or some other kind of sharp object, don't pull it out, because that's the only thing keeping you from bleeding out. Lightsabers, because of their extreme heat, are an ideal weapon for the Jedi because it doesn't always make the individual you stab bleed out. And just because Sith use red lightsabers doesn't mean that it does the same exact thing. They're just as deadly, and they burn just as quickly. And in the case of Reba, when she stabs the Inquisitor right in the stomach area above the navel, it doesn't seem very fatal. I mean, she doesn't slash the blade around. It's a very clean in and out kind of move. From what we know about the Poa'an's anatomy, that's what the race of the Inquisitor is. They are slightly different from humans. They actually can live much longer than we do, around 700 years in some cases. They also have longer limbs than us and potentially longer organs, I guess. The Poa'an are carnivores, if you can't tell by their sharp teeth, and they love themselves some raw meat. This means that most likely inside of their intestinal tract they have some really strong acid that can kill basically any bacteria you would find in uncooked meat. Poa'an also apparently have 2 stomachs, and so a gut wound like the one Reva gives the Grand Inquisitor might not be such a huge deal. Furthermore, we've seen some individuals in Star Wars, especially Force-sensitive Sith, take some pretty horrendous wounds and walk away alive, more or less. The Zabrak Darth Maul was cut in half and somehow managed to survive that wound, and the pureblood Sith Darth Vindican was stabbed in the exact same place by the Jedi Master Khao Sin-Derek. He managed to survive at least for a bit, and he only died because his apprentice Darth Malgus cut his head off. If his apprentice was not an ambitious Sith, he probably could have, rushed into a medic, and he would have probably survived this not so life-threatening injury. Gruesome injury, but not life-threatening. I mean, even humans here on Earth, when shot in the gut by much messier weapons like a slug thrower, can survive for several days in complete agony, with bullet fragments and fabric embedded into their intestines. Now, what if Reva actually stabbed the Inquisitor a little bit higher than we realize? What if she hit some more important organs? Kind of like when Maul stabbed Qui-Gon Jinn. Well, in that case, R.I.P. this Grand Inquisitor, because now he's dead, and he most likely isn't the same individual as the one we see in the Rebels. So here's how this would work. You see, the Grand Inquisitor used to be a Jedi Temple guardian. We actually do see him in the Clone Wars series. He was one of the guards who brings Jedi traitor Barriss Offee to trial for blowing up a part of the Jedi Temple. It was actually this specific case and the framing of Ahsoka Tano and the words of Barriss Offee that made him disillusioned about being a Jedi in the first place. After all, these temple guards were just Jedi Knights who remained anonymous because of their duty, but they were still living beings with their own minds and personalities. The key thing here is it's hard to tell which one of the Jedi Guardians is him, because all their masks and cloaks are the same. That's the whole point of uniforms, I guess. Even when Kanan Jarrus encounters the Grand Inquisitor later on in his own vision and knighthood trial within the Lothal Jedi Temple, the Grand Inquisitor is flanked by 2 other Jedi Temple guards who look a whole lot like him. Look at the elongated masks they're wearing. This is something that only a Pwa-on would need. Also look at the covers over their ears. This is something that only a species like the Pwa-on would wear as well. They have extremely sensitive hearing and would need these areas of their head protected. So yeah, there could actually be multiple Pwa-on who defected from the Temple Guard and joined the Inquisitorius. I mean, the Pwa-on were relatively peaceful individuals, but they got extremely sharp teeth, bloodshot eyes. I mean, they're terrifying. It makes sense that the rest of the galaxy would be afraid of them, and that would, I guess, make them more insulated and stick with their own kind more often. All the Jedi Temple guards who were at Barriss Offee's trial hears her impassioned words about how messed up the Jedi were. They also saw how quickly the Jedi had abandoned Ahsoka Tano. Who's to say that these individuals didn't make a pact together and leave the Jedi Order together during Order 66? And as Jedi Knights, they probably would have been amongst the stronger Jedi who defected to the Inquisitorius. As we covered in our last video where we ranked all of the Inquisitors, most of these individuals were half-trained younglings and Padawan when they were captured and turned to the dark side. Reva the Third Sister wasn't even a former Jedi. She was just some gutter rat who had some Force sensitivity. So it's very possible that these Jedi Knight Temple guards would be placed in the Inquisitorius position. It's also possible, however, that there is only one male Pwa-on who becomes the Inquisitor. And in order to make sure that the Inquisitorius continues to function like a well-oiled machine, the Emperor might have a clone of the Grand Inquisitor waiting. We've taken a look at the other Inquisitors. They are a pretty rowdy bunch and they're pretty incompetent. I mean, you definitely wouldn't want someone like Reva who's a highhead leading the organization, so you might just want another Grand Inquisitor come along who's exactly like the first one. We also know that Emperor Palpatine has a fascination with clones. He's the one who helps come up with the idea of the clone army, and during his reign he would actually attempt to clone Force sensitives that he could transfer his own consciousness into after his original body dies. Palpatine's greatest creation, Supreme Commander Snoke, was an immensely powerful being who could use the Force, which shows us that Palpatine is not only able to clone individuals, he can also clone individuals with Force abilities into new bodies, which is extremely difficult according to Star Wars lore. I would also like to add that this might not be the same Pwa-on as the Grand Inquisitor we see later on in the Rebels cartoon, and that's because the head shape is completely off. I imagine the Inquisitor we see in the Kenobi series would have been considered quite ugly and weird by his species, and very round-headed. I mean, in Episode 3 of Star Wars, we also see Pwa-on, and they actually look pretty cool, which is kind of sad. I mean, are you telling me that you can't recreate the same type of makeup and digital design that George Lucas created almost, I don't know, like 20 years ago? But then again, in the comics that followed Order 66 and happened before the Kenobi series, we actually see the Grand Inquisitor in action, and his appearance shares a lot of similarities to the Rebels version. Is it possible that the Disney team just managed to mess up getting his head shape right? I mean, in the Book of Boba Fett, they also butchered Cad Bane's appearance as well. His head was supposed to be thinner. Lastly, there's the possibility that Disney somehow has screwed up their own timeline. And that would mean, yes, Rebels is no longer canon? Which would be ironic because Disney carried out its own purge of content when it came and took over the franchise. This is, quote, because the expanded universe was too messy and, quote, the past must die, or some nonsense like that. Now, granted, the expanded universe was a bit messy and a bit too campy in some bad ways in certain areas. And we did need some cleaning up and organization. But Disney basically killed everything that it did not create itself, aside from a few exceptions. And it's basically spent the time since reintroducing a lot of these expanded universe elements that fans like, because, you know, I don't think they can really create new content that well on their own. We're talking about individuals like Thrawn, things like Beskar. But even then, the reintroduction of these things have been mixed. For instance, Timothy Zahn wrote another Thrawn trilogy, and it's actually pretty good, and it showcases the super rational Chiss's command abilities. But the Dave Filoni version of Thrawn from the Rebels cartoons is almost like a generic evil villain, with only some minor similarities with Zahn's canon version of Thrawn. Thrawn was never supposed to be an evil baddie who just enjoyed watching people suffer and die. He was supposed to be cold and calculating. He was a realist, but he genuinely harbored no ill will for innocent beings. But I digress. I'm getting off track. I leave the floor to you guys to discuss What the hell is going on here? Is this the Grand Inquisitor? Did Disney mess up? Is it a clone? I really don't know. But with all of your combined comments, you'll definitely have more brain power than this brain I have here. Also, guys, let us know what you think about this new series. Are you excited? What kind of background lore would you guys like to see me cover? In the coming days, we'll have 2 videos coming out. One about what Obi-Wan's youngling days and Padawan days were like, and also we'll have a more in-depth analysis of his lightsaber combat skills, so keep an eye out for that. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy,